my friends. Thanks for everybody being here today. Appreciate you joining me. Just hit the buttons to make everything work. So let me make sure everybody can hear me just fine. I think the volume, everything is working good today. Sorry about the technical problems we had yesterday, but I think I got everything worked out. Appreciate you being here. Hello to everyone on the X platform. Of course, I can be reached on X anytime at simply at Reach JR Dukes. All the other particular venues, you can find me simply at JR Dukes. Hello to everyone on YouTube and our friends on the Twitch platform. If you're new to the channel, I'm JR Dukes. I'm your host. I'm all about examining the truth, getting to the truth, putting a stop to indoctrination, understanding the world we live in. If you love legal issues, you like politics, you like seeing the woke, the crazies out there exposed, this is the channel for you. Now, I want to tell you on the front end, you may not always like exactly what you hear, but that's okay. I'm all about presenting the truth, at least as far as I see it, and explaining the world that we live in. I don't consider myself conservative, liberal, libertarian, whatever. I'm just about the truth and discussing the facts as they present themselves so that we can all review them together. I got a fantastic story that we have to go in tonight. We're going to be talking a lot about Letitia James and some interesting developments that have been happening surrounding her. Two specific things. We talked about the other day how a brand new complaint has been filed against her law license, essentially. And of course, without a law license, you cannot practice law. She could not continue to be the Attorney General of New York. And I'm going to tell you why I think that's going to happen sooner than later. And additionally, she gave an interview the other day that is interesting. And I think she had what I would best call a Freudian slip. You know, this is one of the reasons why you should not talk to anyone, the police or anyone, if you have any type of possible, or you, in her case, she knows there's an investigation going on as far as some type of criminal matter pertaining to her. She knows better. She should know better. She's been hammering people for quite some time as far as going after them legally, bringing the powers that be down on them. She knows better. It's just remarkable that I guess she thinks she's so smart and she wouldn't get caught or whatever, but we'll see how that works out. If you are a returning subscriber, thanks for being here. As always, go ahead if you care to introduce yourself, put your name in the chat, let us know where you're from. And if you care to, here is a link. We always have what I call an open forum. You can simply go ahead and type in a question. If you have any questions in the chat, you can also click that link, call on your mobile device. You don't have to appear on video if you don't want, or you can appear by video. Either way, love to hear any type of comments that you might have. So let's go over a few quick headlines, and we're going to dive right into today's top story featuring sweet Letitia James, right? Obviously, Donald Trump is continuing shaking up Washington, doing exactly what he told us he was going to do for each and every one of us. And I, for one, am extremely happy to see him shaking things up and doing what he promised us that he would do. And of course, we're not used to that. Let's be honest about it. Most politicians, the overwhelming majority of politicians, never do what they tell us they're going to do, right? Well, Donald Trump, of course, is a different individual as far as that goes. Let me make sure I turn my speaker off right here. I apologize if you had any kind of background noise. I want to make sure no one can interrupt my conversation. Okay. Donald Trump does exactly what he says he's going to do, and thank God for that. Well, it came out today, and I'm not sure if many of us heard this. This is kind of like something that's kind of been mentioned, but I haven't heard a lot about it. Turns out the Biden administration kept disinformation, what we call a disinformation dossier on Trump cabinet officials, and that was reported by our current Secretary of State, Marco Rubio. It's going to be very interesting to see who is in that, I guess you'd call it kind of a hit list, a dossier of people contributing to misinformation. I think that's going to be a real big story. You know, one of the things I'm very passionate about is making sure we maintain and keep our free speech rights. Our free speech rights is absolutely fundamental to everything that is near and dear to all of our freedoms. We should all be very, very concerned whenever you hear talk like we heard from the Biden administration that this is disinformation or misinformation and we're going to put a stop to it, or words to that effect. It should be very chilling to each and every one of us, because that is how those in power, if you will, start to nibble away at our constitutional rights. And we have to be aware of it and make sure that it never happens in our country. I feel just as passionately about the lawfare. We've seen Donald Trump effectively be not prosecuted, but persecuted with this lawfare against him. Absolutely sanity. We will always remember the Biden administration as the administration who effectively took America and made us a banana republic, at least on some level. We never should, our founding fathers would never believe it would happen, but we should never descend to a point to where those who are in power, have the current power, go after their adversaries, go after their enemies. It should never have happened. And the only reason I'm for it right now is because it's incumbent upon President Trump and his administration. They must go after the people that participated in this lawfare, if you will, that try to, I call it election interference. Let's just say out loud exactly what was happening. What was happening was they were trying to interfere with our choice to vote for President Trump for President of the United States. And that's what it boiled down to, AKA election interference. And it's extremely troubling that they almost got away with it. You know, when you think Donald Trump's been in power now only 100 days, and you think of all that he's accomplished, the greater miracle in my mind is that he even become Donald Trump 2.0 at all. I mean, can you imagine that an individual was able to become president after being convicted of 34 so-called felonies, having his mugshot taken by sweet Fannie Willis of Fulton County, Georgia, along with her paramour, Nathan Wade? I mean, it's just unbelievable on so many levels. This man faced at least 2 assassination attempts that we know of. One of them actually shot his ear off. I mean, it's just nothing short of a gift from God, ladies and gentlemen, that Donald Trump was effectively unhurt as far as any type of long-term damage or serious damage was concerned. It's just amazing that he was able to make it through all that. But you have the Biden administration and the people working with him. They threw everything at this man. I mean, they literally tried to shoot him, as far as I'm concerned. They tried to take him out. If they couldn't incarcerate him in jail, what was the next best thing? If they didn't actually plan the actual shooting for President Trump, then at a minimum, in my estimation, you know what they did? They made sure he had such minimal security. He had such inadequate security to where a shooter could get that close to him like they did in Pennsylvania. And I was watching that on TV that Saturday that it happened. I was sitting on my sofa with my dog, just sitting there listening to President Trump campaign again. And wow, when I was watching it, I couldn't believe it was even happening. You know, you hear that all the time. It's surreal. You can't believe it's happening. Well, ladies and gentlemen, that's exactly how I felt when that was transpiring. And I literally started praying that everything and everyone was going to be okay. And thank God he was. But what a miracle it is that he was able to come back from the so-called January 6th stuff. Every mainstream press, in my estimation, was against him. Even Fox News, a lot of times, ran pieces that I definitely do not believe were favorable to President Trump. I mean, at least they were not the normal that we would come to expect from Fox News or just their coverage they had, let's say, at Trump 1.0. Well, thank God he made it. That's all I can say. Thank God for his 100 days, and we all just simply need to pray that he has a successful administration. Unfortunately, of course, we know that the other big story of today is the fact that, you know, I mean, it is what it is. These things happen. But you have the, what's that guy's name? Mike Waltz. He's out. Okay, one of Trump's senior advisors. What was his exact title? National Security Advisor Waltz. Well, these type of things happen, right? Let me tell you what I was concerned when I first heard that. I first heard this news. I was thinking, oh no, he got rid of a good man. He got pressured into it. But you know what? At least with President Trump, there's accountability. You never saw that with the Joe Biden-Harris administration. Never. That guy didn't fire anybody. Let's be honest about it. He did not have the capacity to fire anyone, right? I mean, it was really that simple. Donald Trump expects people to do the job and to be professional at all times. And then, of course, when there is a problem like there was with the so-called Signal Gate, the people responsible said, hey, I'm responsible. The buck stops with me. President Trump has acted. The good news here, Waltz did not give up his Florida Congress seat for nothing because, according to published reports, he is going to go ahead and nominate Waltz to be the next ambassador to the United Nations. And I think that's going to be great. I think it's going to work out well. And I truly think he's a patriot, and it's going to work out really well for America. And I plan on this weekend talking a lot more about this Columbia student, this Mahdi. I'll see if I'm saying his name right. I'll get a better spelling or a better pronunciation of his name before we meet next time. Absolutely unreal that he was released by a federal judge. I understand the reason he was released because essentially this guy's a little different than some of the other so-called illegal immigrants we've been hearing about in the news. This particular individual actually has what's called a permanent residence status, aka he has a green card. So there are different standards that apply. I guess you can call it due process, wherever you want to call it. However, I think he made a mistake by effectively taunting the Donald Trump administration because, again, I'll get into it in another video. There are certain things that the president and or his administration can do to revoke his green card, his permanent status, and definitely prevent him from becoming a citizen. This is a guy that is openly hostile towards Israel, towards Jews. Published reports I read said he has made different threats, or at least that he was sympathetic to people that would kill Jewish people. I mean, this is just the kind of guy you do not want. I do not want in the United States of America. And I think that the vast majority of us would agree with that sentiment. All right, before we dive into the video, first video tonight, let me check, see if anybody, hey, American Nana, thank you for being here. I definitely appreciate you joining as always. Looks like we've got about 8 folks on X. Thank you all for being here. And of course, we've got about 12 folks or so on our YouTube platform. And hello to everyone on Twitch. Rosemarie Fiera, it's always good to have you in the chat. Thank you for being here. Thanks for watching today's program. All right, and American Nana wanted to comment. I was watching the rally too. Started crying until he got help. Yeah, that was amazing that I would happen to be watching, and I can feel what you were feeling at that time. It was just kind of surreal, very shocking. I did not cry. I guess as a man, if I did cry, I wouldn't admit it. But the reality is that I was definitely praying, and thank God he turned out to be okay. It is really amazing. It's almost incredulous to think that an individual could be shot at relatively a close range with a long-range assault weapon, a rifle, whatever the particular instrument was that crazy dude used to shoot President Trump, and that President Trump would just turn his head ever so slightly in a direction that he normally does not look at, a particular graphic that he does not normally look at until the end of his normal stump speeds. I mean, clearly, ladies and gentlemen, I could see the hand of God working to protect our president at that particular moment. At least that's just my belief, and amen to that, right? I'm sure we could all agree. We're glad to see our president alive and well. And whether you support him or not, it's always important to pray for those that have a position of power over us. These are people that we elected. One way or the other, they were elected. And we need to hope that they govern us all with wisdom and that they're given direction. So Carol Charters, thank you for being here. I appreciate you being here. And you're from Arkansas. Fantastic. Well, I have a lot of family in Arkansas, too. A lot of family in Newport, Arkansas. I think Jonesboro, Arkansas, too. And, of course, I have a daughter who lives in Batesville, Arkansas. So it's a small world, right? American Nana over in West Virginia. Beautiful, beautiful country over in that particular area. All right. Without further ado, we're going to go ahead and let's talk about sweet Letitia James. If I can submit for your consideration any individual that deserves to get a taste of what she was dishing out the other people, I present to you Exhibit A on your screen right there in the middle. Sweet Letitia James, the current serving New York Attorney General from the great state of New York. It's a liberal state, but hey, we still love New York. You're part of America. We'll get you all right one of these days and get you thinking the correct way. But at any rate, Letitia James, this is a woman. This is a person that actually went after Donald Trump. We all know that it was nothing but a targeted hit piece on Donald Trump. She, along, and this is my opinion, of course, with Alvin Bragg of New York City, they did anything and everything they could to take out, cause pain for Donald Trump. And let's be honest about it. With Trump, they went after his family, literally. This woman here sued his children. Why do you think Ivanka Trump does not show up publicly? I mean, she's there in the background for her dad. She expresses her love for her father. And, hey, Dad, I'm here if you need me. I love you. I support you. She has her own businesses, her own career, and probably most importantly, her own family to be considerate of. And she was put through you-know-what during Trump 1.0. In part, thanks to this lady on your screen, Letitia James, and she does not want to have to be subjected to that nonsense again. And in a lot of ways, I really just don't blame her. And I'm sure that we could all understand the importance of protecting our family. But this is a woman that went after his children, went after him personally, obviously, helped achieve the 34 felonies against Donald Trump. This is the woman who's been all over TV all the time saying how the law applies to everybody, no matter who you are. She went after him for the same things, the same malfeasance, if you will, that apparently she is guilty of committing herself. Just kind of interesting how that works out. You know, you have somebody that is accusing you of these terrible, terrible crimes, and she apparently is doing the exact same thing herself. In my estimation, clearly a deliberate criminal act, and I would say many criminal acts. And I don't believe we're at the end of this particular saga either. There's a lot more to come in this particular saga. And I'm going to tell you in a little bit what I think is going to happen as far as the resolution of this particular case against Letitia James and whether or not I think she's going to go to prison. And I'll give you a quick preview. I do think she's going to go to prison, and I have definitive reasons why I think that a set of handcuffs are in her very, very near future. And remember, when you're a practicing lawyer, and you commit some type of act of what they call moral turpitude or some type of action showing that you're not basically what they consider a good person. Folks, when you lose your law license, it's over. It's not like you can use a friend's law license or you can hire a license holder like you can in a lot of the trades like plumbing, electrical, heating and air conditioning, this type of thing. When you are a attorney and you are licensed to practice law, the best you could ever do is possibly be a paralegal. So just remember that when she loses her law license, which I think she will inevitably lose it, it's all over. Her ability to earn an income is done. It's really a serious and severe consequence. And I do think it is richly deserving for her. Well, looking at this video here is a podcast. And get this, this is on the very conservative network known as MSNBC. And of course, yes, I am being funny there, a little facetious. They are not conservative. Obviously, they're about as left-wing of a news media platform as you can be. Some would even say that they're not really news. But I have to tell you, this guy in this podcast, it's apparently the Chris Hayes podcast. He did the best he could to try to pin her down a little bit and to, kind of tighten the screw on her. This relates to one other quick thing I want to mention to you. When you are in trouble potentially for a crime, any type of crime you could imagine, just fill in the blank, whatever the potential crime is, do not talk about it. Do not talk to the police. Do not talk to investigators. Do not talk to anyone. Get yourself an attorney. You know, the expression is lawyer up. Ladies and gentlemen, trust me on this. That's exactly what you need to do. These are, well, what I just said are things that attorneys teach their own children. This is what prosecutors teach their children. This is what attorney generals, anybody, judges, anybody in the legal law profession, that's what they do. They teach their children and their family members by extension. You do not talk with the police when you are facing some type of possible criminal exposure. I don't care if it's the investigation phase or whatever. Don't. You always get yourself a lawyer and follow legal advice. And you just don't want any lawyer. You want a criminal defense lawyer that has experience defending clients against criminal type issues. It's just that simple. And I'm not telling anyone how to avoid punishment. That's not my intention. My intention is to make sure everybody understands the law and how to apply the law in your daily life. Why should somebody spend more time in prison, for example, than someone else that did the exact same crime? And the only difference between the two is that one person knew how to not communicate with the police and basically exercise their Fifth Amendment right to remain silent. I mean, it's just ABCs of the law. I don't think there should be that disparity. I think everybody should understand this information, and everybody should have the best legal defense possible and protect themselves, their children, as much as possible. I think that's reasonable, and I don't have any problem sharing that with people. If there's one thing I could ever tell the world, at least the United States, is what I just said as far as protecting yourself and your family. So it's astounding to me that Tish James would be talking about this particular subject. She tries to shut it down, but this is something that will happen if you start talking about a particular subject. You might have what I call a Freudian slip. So I want you to listen to this with me, and you can tell me, ladies and gentlemen, if you hear a Freudian slip from Letitia James. Here we go.
During Trump 1.0, I decided to organize, work with other Democratic attorneys general all across this nation in responding and in analyzing Project 2025, analyzing jurisdiction, venue, claims, causes of action, you name it. And which is why we were prepared on day one, following his issuance of the first executive order, basically seeking to attack birthright citizenship or reject birthright citizenship. And that case, as you know, will be argued for the Supreme Court, and it will be argued by the Solicitor General of the great state of New Jersey.
You mentioned the sort of political rhetoric, on the campaign. And this to me is, I just want to stay with this for a second, because it kind of gets to almost an irresolvable tension in a kind of liberal democracy, which is someone like you is elected, someone like the President of the United States is elected. There's a certain degree to which, you can't insulate everything from politics, and you wouldn't want to. You want some level of democratic accountability. And yet at the same time, you don't want a justice system functioning purely for political and partisan ends.
Correct. And there is that tension.
Right. So I want to ask you about, yes, you said
Well, I will just add quickly, there's not only that tension, there's that reality. This is the woman that her entire platform when she ran for the Attorney General position of New York was, I'm going to get Trump. I'm going to get him. I'm going to do everything to him, his family by extension, that I possibly can. She was the one that said, I'm going to go into work every day and be a real pain in his you-know-what. Letitia James for you.
Basically on the campaign trail, we're going to, I don't know the exact words, but we're going to take a hard look at Donald Trump. We're going to go after Donald Trump. At the same time, I wouldn't want you to do it in a bad faith way. But then this question becomes of what's the way that you prove to people
right,
that this isn't, that it's not corrupt, that it's fundamentally in good faith or good faith finding?
So it's important that individuals understand that in our system of justice, that there are judges who analyze the complaint, analyze the allegations, the causes of actions, the claims, and analyze the evidence. And as a result of someone independently analyzing all that we put forth, the petitions that we put forth, they make a determination as to whether or not our cause of action, our claim, has any merit based.
Basically, what she's saying is, hey, don't worry about things. If you have a criminal issue or whatever, we have judges, and we know these judges, they do a very thorough job of looking at whatever evidence there may be. And of course, these judges always arrive at the correct and proper decision. And of course, she's talking about Judge Engeron, for example, that decided Donald Trump should pay around $450 million because he misvalued some of his properties, allegedly. This is the same judge that said Mar-a-Lago was worth $18 million. We've talked about that on this program extensively, that property is worth a ton of money. You have Donald Trump on one hand that was basically a sophisticated investor, a sophisticated person involving real estate. And he stated, as is custom in the industry, hey, here is what I value the property at. Here's what size I believe the property is. And bank, whoever you need to do your own due diligence and make sure my assertions are correct. This is what I believe is accurate, but I cannot make any guarantees, which of course is the industry standards versus Tish James here. And we're going to talk about it in a very short few seconds here, that went ahead and she obtained mortgages by fraud, outright fraud, saying her father was her husband, saying that one building that had 4 units actually had 5, which would have made her ineligible for certain mortgages at a substantially reduced rate. She also stated in sworn testimony and sworn documents that she was a resident of Virginia. And folks, I believe that was in 2023. It's not something years ago. It's something very, very current.
Based on the law. It's also important that individuals understand that politics stops at the door. We have over 800 attorneys here in the office of the...
I'm sorry, I almost choked when I was listening to that. Politics stop at the door as far as the law in New York City is concerned. I have a hard time believing that.
New York State Attorney General. I don't ask anyone their political affiliation. I don't ask anyone their political leanings. All I ask is whether or not they have they are faithful to the Constitution and to the rule of law. And I ask all of the individuals who work here, both attorneys and non-attorneys, to be critical of any decision that I make, to say that I've gone too far, or that it's not based on the law, or that it's grounded in politics, or it's not grounded in the values that we believe in. I have an open door policy. And so individuals do push back. And I do a self-analysis and an analysis of whatever matter that I am contemplating at the moment. And that's why this office has been highly successful. Donald Trump has this, I'm on his enemies list, not only because of that $454 million judgment, but also because all of the cases that we have brought during his second tenure that challenges the rule of law, that challenges the rights, the liberties, and the freedoms of individuals, and particularly those who are vulnerable and marginalized, and specifically immigrants who right now are fearful of government.
And oh my goodness, this woman just cannot get off her soapbox. She says a whole lot of nothingisms, and basically everything out of her mouth is a complete lie or a fabrication or something in between. Just complete nonsense. But to the credit of this host, he's going to try, and we're going to listen to it right now. He's going to try to get some information out of her the best way he can. And a little bit of an alert for you. It's not going to be easy.
If you wanted to get a judgment about someone, you could. And what do you say to that in terms of what the facts actually bore out about the way that Donald Trump, particularly, and his company was conducting its business?
So his investigation, he exaggerated. Let me emphasize that, exaggerated the value of his assets to the tune of millions and millions, and was able to secure favorable insurance and interest rates.
Just like her.
As opposed to, and I'm sure Chris will probably get to this, they're claiming that I engaged in mortgage fraud, that I somehow decided that I was a resident of Virginia, which would be some commute every morning to the office at 28 Liberty. That somehow, I should be held to the same standard as Donald Trump, but somehow what I did was basically similar.
Did you guys hear that? Did you hear that? What I did? This is Exhibit A as to why you do not do what Tish James is doing. There's many lessons to learn here. Really, it's just almost hard to even to speak after hearing this type of nonsense. I want to laugh so badly. She wants you to believe that everything with her office is up, and Donald Trump did all these terrible things by inflating assets and exaggerating this or that. And of course, she's in effect accused of exactly the same type of things, but even worse. She's accused of lying on federal documents that you swear to. It's kind of like a perjury. And in her case, she committed, if the allegations are true, she committed outright fraud. There's really no way of getting around it. And to compare the two is not really something that's comparable. I want to rewind it just a bit because I want to make sure everybody got this. Listen to her say the words out of her own mouth, what I did. Here we go.
That somehow, I should be held to the same standard as Donald Trump, but somehow what I did was
Boom.
basically similar to what Donald Trump engaged in. And there's just no comparison.
There is a comparison. There's a definite comparison. What I did, that's just stupid. That is just a big mistake on her. I have seen this before. These are the kind of interviews that come back, even in the Karen Reed case that's going on right now. She's been talking a lot to the cameras, talking a lot to just people in the media and making comments after her first trial. These comments now are being used against her during her second trial. I can all but guarantee you that Tish James right here, what's going to happen with her in the short future is these are the kind of comments going to come back and haunt her. I really don't think that there's any other way of getting around that. What do you guys think? You agree, disagree? I'm curious because I think she is in serious trouble. Let's take a look at this little exhibit that I have here for us. I want to make sure we're clear that as to what the allegations are. And by the way, I would be remiss if I did not share the individual that's essentially responsible for this investigation coming to light. And this is this gentleman's name is the one that has white collar crime. That's his website. I believe his name's Sam Antar, if I'm saying his name correctly. But check out his website if you're interested. White collar fraud, actually, whitecollarfraud.com. Sam E. Antar. He is a genius. This guy's a forensic accounting. He's a Democrat. It's not like he went after her to go after her. I heard an interview where he basically stated that, hey, I was looking at other politicians' records and I just happened to come across her records, and there was obviously some fraud. Something is not right here. That's exactly what this gentleman was investigating and what he continues to investigate, because from what I'm understanding, it's not just 1, 2, or 3 properties. There is multiple properties. So this thing here might expand and it might even reach further and deeper because she has more properties than just the 2 properties that's been the subject of this particular outing, if you would, or the allegations against her. So let's take a quick peek at this here. Here are the breakdown of the charges as of right now. My prediction, as I promised, is real clear. She is going to be arrested, no doubt in my mind. Just like the other individuals in Baltimore, I believe it was the mayor of Baltimore and a state attorney in Baltimore, Darren Trump 1.0. They came out against Donald Trump. They were very aggressive. They were very nasty. This guy's bad. This guy's this. Well, guess what? One of them, I believe it was the actual state prosecutor, or the state attorney from that particular district there. As soon as she was indicted, she went with her attorneys down to the office there, and she's like, hey, can we cut a deal? And they cut a deal with her. I believe she received a certain amount of home confinement. Now, the actual mayor, and again, we've talked about this on this program, I believe she served up to 3 years incarcerated, plus fines and other types of probation afterwards. She's out of jail now, to the best of my knowledge, because she was sentenced several years ago. So she only had a 3-year sentence, but 3 years is a long time when you're in the federal pen. And I think Tish James is on her way. Another thing I want to make sure I clearly state is that the governor of New York, that Hochul lady, she is not going to allow Tish James to stay in office, especially once she is indicted by the Department of Justice. Once the DOJ comes out and they actually arrest her, she's going to have really no choice but to remove the Attorney General Tish James from office. And then that's the end of Tish James. The cycle has been completed at that particular time. So if I was Fannie Willis, if I was Nathan Wade, if I was any of these bad actors that we clearly know there's some type of nonsense going on there, I, ladies and gentlemen, would not be sleeping comfortably at night. Full stop. I can't really even state it any more clear than that. So my prediction, she's going to lose her job from the governor sooner than later. I think that a Department of Justice indictment is a foregone conclusion. It's just a matter of when. And I think there's going to be many other charges added to this particular indictment that's forthcoming. So we're going to take a quick peek at this here. This is on the property. Let's call it property number 1, Brooklyn, New York property. I only put the address on the screen. It's not me doxing anybody. This address is in multiple public documents all over the internet, all over X, all over YouTube for that matter. So don't be thinking that I'm doxing anybody, because I would not do that. And I just want to make that very, very clear. Check the comments. American Nana, transplant from Boston. I did not know that about you. And let's see, Carol. My dad was from, was that Jane Lou, West Virginia? All right. And I want to give a quick welcome to P, if I can read the screen correctly. Hackman, thank you. I hope I'm saying your name right. Hacky Man, I think so you say it. Thanks for being here. Appreciate you being here from North Carolina. All right. Property number 1, key allegations on this one property. This is a picture of it right here on the screen. We looked at that property close up yesterday, and we'll be taking a look at it, Lord willing, in the very near future in more detail. James allegedly misrepresented this property as having 4 units on the mortgage and financial disclosure documents. However, a 2001 certificate of occupancy indicates the building has 5 units. And there's been independent journalists that have went to that location, and they indeed confirmed it has 5 separate units versus the 4 units that she swore on under oath effectively that it only had 4, and indeed it has 5. And she has benefited considerably because there's different rules for 5 units versus 4 units, as we've been talking about. This discrepancy could have allowed her to qualify for more favorable loan terms intended for smaller multifamily properties. And second is the Norfolk, Virginia property. And it's, let's see, key allegations in 2023. Remember, this is not old allegations. This is not old stuff. These are recent situations, if you will. 2023 is pretty close to our time here in 2025. James co-signed a mortgage for this property, declaring it was her quote-unquote principal residence. Now, principal residence is synonymous with the word domicile. Remember, you can have one domicile in the entire world. You can have many residents, but only one domicile. Declaring it as her principal residence to obtain better loan terms. However, as the sitting New York Attorney General, she was required to reside in New York. You cannot be the New York Attorney General and not reside in the state of New York. I mean, that's kind of common sense, right? Reports suggest she never actually moved to the Virginia home, which was primarily occupied by her niece. And just a quick reminder, she swore in documents, these quote unquote federal documents that she's going to have to give an account for, that I believe it was within 60 days, she was going to relocate to this particular property in Virginia. Clearly, if the allegations are true, a complete lie, AKA fraud, ladies and gentlemen. That is the clearest definition of fraud. And I think she's going to have to give account for this. At least that's what I'm hoping. I think it's going to send a chilling message to other individuals that you cannot engage in this type of behavior. Listen, I know a couple right here in my home state of Florida. Let me share this screen with you real quick as we take a look at this, because I want to pop through a few things right here. So in my home state of Florida, there was a older couple, a husband and wife. I think I'm trying to think what exact town it was. It was in Pasco County, Florida, right on the Gulf somewhere. They had a home that had a sinkhole. Now in Florida, we have a lot of issues with something called sinkholes. Basically, the ground just gives out underneath your home, and you can lose your entire home. You can lose your life as a result of a sinkhole. Fast forward, they went ahead and made an insurance claim. They were compensated for the sinkhole, and they made minimum cosmetic repairs to the sinkhole. Well, the problem, ladies and gentlemen, is they sold the home, and the new buyer was like a young mother with one or two kids, this type of thing. It was never disclosed to her. As a matter of fact, the federal disclosure forms that you had to sign for that particular transaction on that property, they stated there was no issues with sinkholes. There was never a sinkhole issue. They'd never been paid out for a sinkhole, nothing, no mention of it whatsoever. Well, of course, as you can imagine, the sinkhole reopened up and it effectively destroyed that house. The poor lady that was in the house, there was no injuries that I know of to her or her children. However, she got screwed out of all the money that she put down on the house, and she paid into the house, and she technically still owes the mortgage on that house. And here's the kicker, because there already was a sinkhole problem and they paid off, the insurance company paid off the way things were, let's just say the way things were knitted together, the insurance company would not pay a second time to fix the sinkhole. So this woman was holding the bag. She was defrauded. The federal government got wind of exactly what transpired in this particular case. Ladies and gentlemen, the husband and wife were brought up on federal charges pertaining to this fraud. I mean, clearly that is a fraud, similar to what we're talking about here with Tish James. They were brought up on these fraud charges. They offered the wife a deal. You testify against your husband, and we'll give you a much lesser, a much more lenient sentence. And she said no. She said no. So guess what? The FBI literally raided one day. She was getting a pedicure at a local nail salon. They had the news there covering this particular event. The FBI went in there, arrested her at the nail salon, took her straight to jail, and at the same time they arrested her husband at his place of business. I think he was a heating and air guy, electrician, something like that. But at any rate, they raided him at his little office, hauled him into jail. Both of them today have been tried and convicted and are serving 20 years in the federal penitentiary. So this is very serious stuff. Now, Letitia James could face potentially up to 30 years just on the current charges that we know are being considered, just on these current charges, if you can believe that, 30 years and or a $1 million fine. And you may be thinking, hey, how is it that is even right? I mean, why would she have to pay that type of fine? Well, you got to remember, depending on the loan and depending on the circumstances, the federal government does not want people going around effectively ripping you off, ripping me off, because the federal government offers certain loans. Generally they back the loans, they guarantee the loans, this type of thing. It's a matter of having confidence in our financial system. So you cannot allow these types of fraud to be allowed to exist in our country. And that's the reason why you have to use such a heavy hand. Had she done things correctly and properly, she would have paid in a ton more money on the monthly mortgage payments, essentially. Also, she would have had to put down a lot of more money on a five dwelling unit versus a 4 dwelling unit. I hope that makes sense the way that I'm explaining that. So understand, this is not a victimless crime, if you will. It has real implications basically to the economy as a whole. And it's all the more important in this particular case because this particular AG went on the frontal attack against Donald Trump, his children, his entire empire. She actively participated in what I would call election interference by denying you or me the right to vote for who we want to be the next president of the United States. She went after him and did everything she possibly could to him. And I think the most ironic thing is the fact that it's very similar types of crimes that we're talking about here. It's just absolute pure sanity that she thought she could get away with this. We've been talking about the fact that if you live in a glass house, you should not be throwing stones. If I was Tish James and I went after Donald Trump the way she did, I would have made sure that there's nothing in my background that I could have got popped for. Does that make any sense? I'm sure y'all would have too. It just is what it is. All right, so quickly on your screen, this is the property on Lafayette Avenue, right there in New York. So this is the property right here. And if you notice too, we looked at this the other day, this particular picture has 5, what looks to me to be permits or something along them lines. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Guess what? That's a good indication that there are 5 individual dwelling units there. Just thought that was interesting. I wanted to kind of point that out to you right there. This is the property in the great state of Norfolk, Virginia. And we took a brief look at this the other day. You can see it's just a modest, I call it working class family type neighborhood. This is the other property that she's in trouble for. Now, some of the allegations against her, specifically the one where she stated on these documents, and she swore under oath that her father was her husband. I believe that's back from all the way from like 1983, and the statute of limitation has ran on that particular crime, if you will. However, there are plenty of other acts that she, again, allegedly has committed that they could sink their teeth into, so to speak. So I just want to make sure we talked about that and exactly what kind of problem she could be facing. So let's briefly go over this here because I want to talk about this document in front of you right here. Remember, I told you how important your law license is if you are an attorney. If you're an attorney, listen, they have what they call canons. To my knowledge, a lot of the canons pertain to judges, basically the rules that you have to operate by. But whether you call them rules of conduct, judicial canons, whatever, attorneys are considered what they call an officer of the court. And what that means is they can't do just what they want to do. In other words, you cannot effectively just win at all means. You can't just, hey, I got to win this case, so I'm going to do whatever I have to do. You're supposed to be an officer of the court, and that means, in a nutshell, you agree to conduct yourself by certain ethical rules, by certain operating procedures, if you will. In other words, as a prosecutor, if you have evidence of a person's innocence, you have to give that evidence to the defense counsel. I mean, it's just the way the rules are, and they're there for a very good reason that I don't want to drill down on. But the short version would be, we don't want innocent people in jail in this country. You know, that at least that's the idea. So these are very serious allegations against her. Now, this is America First Legal. I want to disclose on the front end, I don't have any affiliation with this group. However, this group is a well-known supporter of President Trump. So I mean, that's pretty well common sense. They support Donald Trump, but that doesn't mean that the allegations in here are meritless. I want to briefly go through this letter. It's just a few pages, and we'll talk about it on the other side here. All right. April 24th, 2025, to the Committee on Professional Standards. America First Legal, AFL, is a national nonprofit organization working to protect the rule of law, due process, and equal protection for all Americans. We are writing to file a formal complaint against New York Attorney General Letitia James based on information that was recently made public. On April 14, 2025, William J. Plute, let me see how you say his last name. I don't want to keep saying his name during the entire thing. Palti, that's how you say it, Palti. One good thing about these computers, you can click on it and click the speech option, and it will give you an idea. So we'll call him Palti. Palti, Director of U.S. Federal Housing, FHFP, sent a letter to Attorney General Pam Bondi and Deputy Attorney General Todd Blanche referring Ms. James for criminal prosecution. We discussed, I believe we read that actual referral letter to Pam Bondi about a week ago. Factual allegations pursuant to this letter to the Department of Justice. As shown below, the evidence indicates that Mrs. James falsely falsified bank documents and property records to acquire government-backed assistance loans and on more favorable loan terms. While serving as the Attorney General for the state of New York, Mrs. James purchased a home in Norfolk, Virginia, the one we just looked at, and in the process declared that she intended to, quote, to occupy this property as my principal residence, end of quote. This meant that she would be a full-time resident of Norfolk, Virginia. The obvious reason for making the certification would be to obtain a lower interest rate on the mortgage loan. Additionally, on another occasion, Mrs. James appeared to have misrepresented the number of dwelling units in a multi-dwelling building she owned. This is the one we've been looking at in New York. She continued to misrepresent the number of dwelling units in subsequent years to obtain additional benefits. Just like they charged Donald Trump with a separate crime every time he wrote a check to Stormy Daniels, and that was one felony count, they very well will charge Letitia James with a specific felony, a separate felony, every single time, just like it says in here, subsequent years to obtain additional benefits. Every time she refiled a document, that is likely to be a separate felonious account. So just keep that in mind. Additional benefits to which she was not entitled to, including a mortgage refinancing through a federally backed lender at a lower rate than the typically offered through the private market. First, this letter and exhibits allege that on August of 2023, Ms. James purchased a home in Norfolk, Virginia through a power of attorney granted to Mrs. Shamise Thompson Harrison. Remember, that is her niece, if I remember correctly. During the purchase, the documents reflect that this Virginia property would be Mrs. James' primary residence, aka her domicile. Ms. James was elected as the Attorney General for the state of New York in 2018. In 2022, Ms. James flirted with a run for governor. This is a woman that wanted to be the governor of the state of New York. Really, really shocking when you think about it. Instead of running for governor, she decided to run for re-election as the New York State Attorney General and won. From 2018 until present, Mrs. James has been the elected Attorney General of New York State. It is unlikely she ever planned to be a full-time resident of Norfolk, Virginia. Second, the letter provided shows evidence that Ms. James purchased a multi-dwelling unit building with 5 units listed on the certificate of occupancy. However, in 2020, she submitted an application for the Home Affordable Modification Program, another federal program. The abbreviation, the acronym is HAMP, indicating the property only had 4 dwelling units and not 5. And she did the same in 2019 refinance through the Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac. We're all familiar with Freddie Mae and Fannie Mac. These are not necessarily government entities. However, they're what we consider quasi-government entities. These loans are capped at 4 dwelling units per property. So in order to qualify for these Freddie Mac, Fannie Mae loans, you have to have a property that has 4 or less dwelling units inside that property. Otherwise, you're simply not qualified. That's just the terms of these particular loans via this program. As identified in this letter, a building with more than 4 dwelling units is treated differently and requires a larger down payment and increased interest rates because the risk is higher. Further, the HAMP program, which Ms. James also took advantage of, was limited to properties with 4 dwelling units or fewer. It appears Ms. James misrepresented the number of dwelling units to obtain a more favorable loan terms or mortgage assistance through HAMP. Okay, now they're going to get into what we talked about, the rules of professional conduct. As the New York Rules of Professional Conduct preamble states, a lawyer is an officer of the legal system. We just talked about this, who has a duty to uphold the law and promote the administration of justice. A lawyer should further the public's understanding, trust, and confidence in the rule of law and the justice system. Because in a constitutional democracy, which of course is what our country is, Legal institutions depend on popular participation and support to maintain their authority. In other words, it undermines the credibility of the entire system to allow this type of malfeasance to go on. You cannot have a functioning, healthy system if you allow corruption, like what's alleged in this document, to continue. Further, the legal profession is largely self-governing. The legal profession helps preserve the law from governmental abuse. If the government itself regulated the legal profession, the profession would lose part of its purses. Thus, lawyers are expected to observe the rules of professional conduct. That's what we were talking about with the canons and the rules. It continues. Further, to do so harms the entire profession and the rule of law. So as long as practitioners are guided by these principles, the law will continue to be a noble profession. That was a quote in the preamble. And failure to comply with an obligation or prohibition is, quote, a basis for invoking the disciplinary process, end quote. The rules of professional conduct define fraud as conduct that, quote, has a purpose to deceive, end quote. Easy peasy, right? Easy to understand that. Mrs. James, material misrepresentations meet that definition and call into question her candor, trustworthiness, and honesty. If Miss James took the actions described in that letter, Rule 8.4 B and C have been violated. Rule 8.4 B and C state, quote, a lawyer or law firm shall not engage in illegal conduct that adversely reflects on the lawyer's honesty, trustworthiness, or fitness as a lawyer. It goes on. C, this is a quote, engage in conduct involving dishonesty, fraud, deceit, or misrepresentation. Boom. I mean, they lay it out like you would expect an attorney to lay this out. The New York Bar has an independent duty to conduct its own investigation into the allegations raised in this letter to the Department of Justice, while beyond a reasonable doubt, we've all heard that, right? The reasonable doubt in a trial. Well, the reasonable doubt here, beyond a reasonable doubt, is the well-known standard for criminal prosecutions. The rules of professional conduct are not so strict and only require what they call a fair preponderance of the evidence, and they cite the authority here. It is well settled that the standard of proof in attorney disciplinary proceedings is a fair preponderance of the evidence. That is the standard. So let's think of it in football terms. Generally, if you have to prove beyond a reasonable doubt, that might be like on the 97-yard line. I would say that a preponderance of the evidence basically means you got to make it to, let's say, the 51-yard line. This committee has the authority to begin an investigation based on this complaint or to act on its own. New York Code, well, it just cites the codes. I'm not going to read it. Further, there is currently no other legal action or proceeding that would be an in-between between the state of New York and what they're asking them to do. This committee should exercise its statutory authority and launch its own independent investigation of these allegations. The legal profession ought to continue to regulate itself, and failure to do so will tell the public that certain officials are now above the law. And ladies and gentlemen, we all know that Letitia James does not believe anybody is above the law, right? We've heard that many, many times. If Ms. James has engaged in fraud by deceiving her lenders and the government to obtain financial benefits she would otherwise not be entitled to, then she has engaged in professional misconduct and violated her obligations as a lawyer and is subject to discipline by the New York State Bar. This letter, the letter they're referencing, this Pollitt's letter, identifies Ms. James's alleged intentional misrepresentation through her own declaration that she intended to occupy the property in North Fork, Virginia as her principal residence, aka her domicile. We call it a domicile here in Florida, but it's pretty well the same way. At the same time, she declared her intent to make North Fork, Virginia her principal residence. She was serving as the Attorney General for the state of New York. Additionally, The year before Miss James made this declaration, she ran for re-election as Attorney General of New York and won. After serving less than a year of her new term, it seems unlikely she has intended to relocate to another state. Duh. And remember, I said you shouldn't be talking in interviews. Well, the interview we just watched, you heard the current Attorney General, aka Letitia James, say, everybody knows I don't drive all the way from Virginia. That's another stupid remark she made, in my estimation. Again, it can be used as evidence against her to show she has never lived there and she never intended to live there. Boom. It's just another problem. In my estimation, she has caused for herself. There is no public indication that she ever planned to relocate to Norfolk, Virginia. Further, the New York Constitution in Article 4, Section 2 of Article 5(1) requires the Attorney General to be a resident of New York for at least 5 years. Further, state law requires public office holders to be residents of the state. That's kind of common sense, isn't it? You can't hold a public position of leadership, such as governor, attorney general, whatever, and not be a bona fide resident, aka principal resident, aka domicile of that particular state. I think that's just common sense. If in fact Miss James occupied the Norfolk, Virginia home as her principal residence, she would have failed to continue being a New York resident, would have been ineligible to hold her office. Of course, she's the current Attorney General of the state of New York. If, however, Miss James was intentionally deceptive about making the home in Norfolk, Virginia, her principal residence, she violated the rules of professional conduct by engaging in conduct that, quote, involved dishonesty or deceit, end quote, period, right? In violation of Rule 8.4, if she did it for financial gain, that she violated Rule 8.4b by engaging in illegal conduct that adversely reflects on the lawyer's honesty, trustworthiness, or fitness as a lawyer. Further, if the allegations are well-founded, she has brought disrepute to the bar and caused serious damage to the reputation of the profession. Hang on a sec. I almost felt a tear coming up in my eyes. I'm sorry. Okay, back on here. Additionally, the letter identifies her intentional misreputation through her repeated various mortgage applications or filings for government assistance, in which she reduced the number of dwellings in a multi-dwelling building she owns. If the building has 5 dwellings, as indicated by certificate of occupancy, then her repeated representations that it only has 4 dwellings are likely fraudulent. Have you noticed how they're careful about their wording? They want to be very careful how they approach this. They themselves don't want to be on the receiving end of a slander suit if for some reason these allegations are not true. So they're very, very careful. And I like the way they write it, and it speaks of the professional nature of this letter. For example, it appears, right? I like it. It appears she has continued to make this reputation to obtain financial benefits she otherwise would not be entitled to. Mrs. James' actions meets the definition of fraud as defined in the rules of professional conduct. Thus, if she engaged in the activity as alleged, she has violated Rule 8.4. Conclusion. Significantly, as the chief legal officer for the state of New York, Ms. James ought to aspire to the highest ethical standards. Instead, it appears she has repeatedly traded her integrity for monetary benefit through deceiving lenders and the public in pursuit of personal enrichment. Such actions harm the rule of law and bring disrepute to the profession. Ms. James's conduct, if it is as alleged, shows that she failed to uphold the letter and spirit of the rules of professional conduct. The New York Bar Committee on Professional Standards for the Albany region should immediately launch an investigation into Ms. James' actions, and if it determines the allegations are true, impose appropriate discipline. As Ms. James herself previously explained, quote, no matter how big, rich, or powerful you think you are, no one is above the law, end quote. I love it, huh? Exact words she has used repeatedly against our president, Donald Trump. It's what you call the roosters coming home to roost, right? Or something to that effect. She's definitely going to pay a price for her misconduct. If these allegations are true, I expect a nice big pair of handcuffs to be waiting for sweet Letitia James, right? Amen to that. I don't know about you. I don't know about y'all, ladies and gentlemen. I cannot think of a more deserving individual than Letitia James. That's just the way that I see it. So, at any rate, and yeah, by the way, you're right, Cindy. The guy that the Sam Antire, this guy is a registered lifelong Democrat. I've heard him say that many times, as far as comments and statements he's made in different interviews. All right, my friend Sapphire's there. Sapphire, good to see you, my friend. She signed for the Virginia property resident. Isn't disqualify her to be? Yeah, unfortunately, it does, my friend. The you cannot. Let me make sure I read this right. The way I understand it, from the second she signed for the Virginia property resident, I don't know about the second she signed it, but as soon as she moves, in quotes, as soon as she changes her domicile, aka her principal residence, yes, sir, you're absolutely right. At that point, she would be ineligible to continue serving as the New York Attorney General. Absolutely correct. All right. Heck, man, Tish, the facts are on legal papers with your signature note. Yeah, she is in trouble, my friend. Exactly right. And of course, we have to thank Sam Antire. Sapphire is pointing out forensic accountant Sam Antire said yesterday each time she lists the New York property as a 4-unit instead of 5. Yeah, I agree. Every single time, just like they did to our president, President Trump. Every time he wrote one of those checks, you bet it was a separate felony account. That's how they got the 34 felonies. Remember, Alvin Bragg took these dead misdemeanors. And what does that mean? These misdemeanors were dead because the statute of limitation had passed and there was no legal way to bring state charges against President Donald Trump for those alleged problems as far as keeping the books. However, under federal law, the statute of limitation was much longer, and he was able to effectively weave those dead misdemeanors, resurrect those dead misdemeanors, if you will, into separate felonious counts. And unfortunately, Donald Trump was convicted on those accounts. I believe they call it Class E felonies in the state of New York. But make no mistake about it, had President Trump not won President of the United States, there's not a doubt in my mind that he would be in jail right now. Guaranteed. There's no way a judge could not sentence you to jail. Well, first of all, we know that judge is crooked. That's my opinion. There's something wrong there. That whole process is wrong. This one judge able to get all of these cases involving Donald Trump and every defendant related to Donald Trump into his courtroom, something is seriously wrong. It's supposed to be a lottery system. I figured out at one time what the odds are with a true random lottery of receiving all them different cases. It was, let's just say it was very remote at a minimum. And then this particular judge, his own daughter is a high-powered Democratic operative. I mean, she represents the likes of Adam Schiff. And of course, we know what President Trump calls him. I believe she represented Kamala Harris, a whole bunch of other individuals. So, boom. What was that? Judge Merchant, I think was his name. I'd have to double check. But there's something very crooked about the whole process in the state of New York and by extension, the city of New York. As a matter of fact, the Governor Hochul was caught on a hot mic within the last week or two talking about President Trump. And she made the comment that, hey, I control the judges. I can make life very difficult for him. So bring it on. You know, it's just amazing that these type of actions, these types of comments would even be made in the United States. Our founding fathers, ladies and gentlemen, if they could, would be rolling over in their graves right now, trying to make sense of this nonsense that this nonsense that's been going on for way too long. And it is my prayer that President Trump and his administration is able to send such a decisive and hard message for future presidents, future administrations, that listen, you can do this, you can engage in this type of behavior, but when you do, there's going to be a price that's going to have to be paid. And of course, right now we see the Democratic Party in complete shambles. They do not have a leader, they do not have a message, they don't have a platform. They're fighting internally. I saw James Carville, and the guy that's the current leader, I guess you can call him, the actual head of the DNC party right now. I mean, you have open civil war going on in their party. And it's all because of one special man, President Donald Trump, was able to effectively just destroy those folks. And more power to him is the way that I look at it. But Forge, it's funny how Sam Antara is a convicted felon and found out about Letitia James. And yeah, it is interesting. My understanding is he got in trouble back. Some of y'all may be old enough to remember those Crazy Eddie commercials that were all over TV. You know, it'd be like, hey, it's Crazy Eddie. We got all kinds of electronics on special where the prices are insane. I remember that stuff when I was a kid. It was pretty entertaining. I think he got caught up in whatever nonsense was going on. And this guy has straightened his life up in the meantime, is my understanding. And I also understand he's now helps the FBI with certain matters. And in addition to that, he is a forensic accountant. So if you go to his website, again, that, what is that, white collar, let me double check here. I want to make sure I quote it right. Yeah, here it is. It's the white collar fraud, this Sam Antire. He's got some great stories, some great articles on here. And this guy is thorough. I mean, he's very thorough. Everything that he states, he's got something to connect it to for proof, to back it up. And I think that is, hey, kudos to him. Matter of fact, he's following me now, I believe, on X. So I'm going to reach out to him and see if I can't offer him a chance to come on the program and talk with us about it. I think it'd be a good opportunity for all of us just to chat with him and to thank him and to encourage him to continue taking a deep dive on this very important subject as far as I'm concerned. So amen to that, and Godspeed to him, right? Yeah, Judge Merchant's daughter raised 93 million. Yeah, that's exactly right. She is a high-powered, if you will, Democratic operative, and it's just amazing that he was allowed to handle and set in judgment of Donald Trump when I believe he himself is a registered Democrat and he contributed to Biden's campaign. It was only $20-$30, something like that. But I'm just saying, we're supposed to have fairness in this country, and even the appearance of anything unfair is supposed to be rectified before it goes forward. That's my take on it. That's the way I see it. So, all right, I want to start closing it down, landing the plane right now because I don't want to lose my voice completely. We've got about 10 folks right now on X, another 10 on YouTube, and our friends on Twitch. Thank y'all all for being here. I really appreciate the opportunity to come, say hello, chat. Thank you for subscribing. If you haven't done so, you want to do me a favor, go ahead and subscribe to the channel. Hit that thumbs up button. If you're on the X platform, you can always reach me at Reach J.R. Dukes. All the other platforms, I'm simply at J.R. Dukes on YouTube and the other platforms. So thank you all. Thank you, American, and I appreciate everybody tuning in to hear what I have to say. It is definitely my pleasure to have time to talk with each and every one of you. Don't hesitate to reach out to me. I think my contact information is scrolling on the screen right now. I try to personally respond to everybody that has a question and or comment. So don't hesitate to reach out and say hello. And if you hit that subscription button, you'll know when I go live or drop a video so that we can have a chat with our family. Folks, thank you again. I always like to say, keep that mind free, never give up. And until next time, I am J.R. Dukes.